Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Luigi Del Puerto. I'm the associate publisher and editor of the Arizona Capital Times. Of course, the Arizona Capital Times covers state government and politics. A lot of people describe us as a nonpartisan, non-ideological, and independent newspaper. I kind of refer to ourselves as an equal harassment newspaper. And if you don't have a subscription, let me know, and I'll get you a subscription. And so this morning, we are going to talk about a subject that's really important. Early childhood learning to a significant degree is the nexus between our state's ability to ensure that we continue to flourish in the state. It is a nexus between parents and businesses, of course, but it's also the bridge to K-12 education, and that is how crucial it is. So we're going to talk about where our childcare community is at this point. I want to thank our sponsor, Helios Education Foundation, for engaging and supporting us this way. Without Helios support, we cannot provide for a platform to discuss important subjects such as the one that we are discussing this morning. Helios Education Foundation is a nonprofit organization dedicated to enriching the lives of individuals in Arizona and Florida by creating opportunities for success in post-secondary education. The foundation strategically invests in programs and initiatives that address some of the most critical issues affecting education today. Helios is a burgeoning organization focused in 3 impact areas: early grade success, college and career readiness, and post-secondary completion. And of course, since its inception, Helios has invested millions of dollars across Arizona and Florida to improve student success and their long-term quality of life. And to tell us more about the organization, please welcome Janice Palmer, the Vice President and Director of Policy at Helios Education Foundation.
Fabulous. Thank you, Luigi, so much, and the Capital Times for holding these virtual morning scoops. I've been lucky enough to be able to join a few of them, and every time I leave learning something new, and I know today is going to be no different. There's been a lot of attention paid, and rightly so, about the impact COVID-19 is having on K-12 and higher education. However, we've heard a lot less about what it means to early education, and it's significant. So we wanted to elevate that conversation and are so grateful to have such an amazing panel of experts with us today to do just that. And so on behalf of Helios Education Foundation, we want to thank each and every one of the panelists, all of my dear friends, and all of those participating online. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to you, Luigi.
Thank you, Janice. Appreciate it. Joining us this morning is Senator Kate Brophy-McGee, who represents Legislative District 28. Senator Brophy-McGee is the chairwoman of the Arizona Senate Health and Human Services Committee, co-chair of the DCS Legislative Oversight Committee, and a member of the Senate Education and Higher Education and Workforce Development Committees. She's also a member of the Senate Ethics Committee. Senator Brophy-McGee also serves on the Arizona Human Trafficking Council, the Council on Child Safety and Family Empowerment, and she co-chairs the Commission to Prevent Violence Against Women. Senator Brophy-McGee previously served in the Arizona House, and prior to her election to the legislature, she served nearly a decade on the Washington Elementary School Board, including 4 terms as board president. She also served 6 years on the Arizona School Facilities Board, including 1 term as chairman. Senator Kate Brophy-McGee, thank you for joining us.
It's wonderful to be here, and thank you to Helios Foundation for sponsoring this. Thank you to the Capital Times for bringing this important issue to the forefront. I could not be more honored to be on this panel with these amazing panelists, these wonderful experts. So thank you for the privilege of participating.
And also joining us is Representative Lorenzo, who represents Legislative District 19, right? LD 19, right? And prior to joining the legislature, Representative Shira served on the Avondale City Council. He is a business development consultant, and he is also an experienced marketing director. He has served as vice chair of the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, as secretary of the Maricopa County Sheriff Paul Penzone's Hispanic Advisory Board, and as a member of the Maricopa Association of Governments Economic Development Committee. Representative Shera is a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. Representative, thank you for joining us this morning.
Luigi, thank you very much for having me today, and thank you to the Helios Foundation for sponsoring today's event. I'm really excited to sit here with people so dedicated to our youngest scholars. I can't wait to hear what we're going to talk about today. So thank you everyone for joining in today, and let's get going.
Also with us is Siman Qaasim, who is the President and CEO of the Children's Action Alliance. Siman, did I get your name right?
You did.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Siman led the Children's Action Alliance health policy initiatives to key victories at the state legislature and Congress, such as protecting kids' care for 35,000 children in Arizona prior to becoming CEO of the Children's Action Alliance. She brings 20 years of professional experience in community-based health and human services initiatives in a variety of diverse settings. Prior to joining the CAA, she led the Office of School Health and Wellness Initiatives and the Office of Health Promotion and Education at the Maricopa County Department of Public Health. She has also worked abroad in the Bahamas as an Assistant Director of Health and Safety for a private company and for an income-generating project with the Maasai communities in Tanzania. Siman, thank you again. Appreciate your joining us.
Yep, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you to Helios and to the Capital Times.
And finally, we have Barbie Prinster, who is the Program Director for the Arizona Early Childhood Education Association, the trade association representing private licensed child care centers statewide. And this group, by the way, promotes affordable, quality early childhood care and education that meets the needs of Arizona's families and children. In the last year, Barbie has taken on the role of acting director of the association. She has worked in the early childhood education field for more than 20 years, starting out as a three-year-old teacher and eventually becoming a center director. For the last 12 years, she has worked for the association overseeing vendor and membership development, managing professional development training contracts, and providing advocacy training and early childhood conferences for the community. And Barbie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here, and it's an honor. And thank you to Helios for sponsoring this, and also for you, Luigi.
Thank you. And for our viewers and our listeners, we would love to get your questions. So don't forget to send them in via the Q&A room or via the chat room. We'll try to get it to as many of them as possible near the end of the program. So I think I'm going to start by asking Barbie, and what is an early childhood learning center? How is that different from, I guess you could say, daycare?
I think when we think about daycare, we think of dropping our children off so we can go to work, and maybe they're, just doing smaller day-to-day activities. Maybe not a lot of teacher-child interaction. When we talk about high-quality care, we're talking about lower teacher-to-child ratios, which is really important, a safe, secure learning environment, good, wonderful teacher-child interactions that kind of serve and return back and forth piece between children and babies, and all the way up to, from birth to age 5 is, and even into school age kids too. But providing that safe, loving, nurturing environment, kids have to feel safe in their environment in order to learn. And that's the environment that we want to provide them on a daily basis. And nurturing the whole child, as well as taking care of their families too. Making sure that these children have food in their bellies when they go home, and are fed nutritious meals all during the day. Having great parent engagement with your families is really important, and doing assessments on children at least a couple times a year. Some centers even do small parent-teacher conferences. So maintain that communication with your center, your teachers, your center director, and your families as well.
So the idea then is that these learning centers are not just caring for the children, our youngest children, but they're also preparing them really for K-12 education, right?
Exactly. They really are. And like you spoke to before, we're building that bridge. We're building brains actually every single day. We're really building brains. And that is the message that we really need to get out to everyone around early childhood education. We've learned so much in the last 10 to 15 years on how children learn and how their brains are developing and how important it is that these childhood experiences are positive and loving and nurturing and filling that emotional and social needs for these kids to be successful in kindergarten and then on through life into into high school and hopefully on to college.
And Siman, I want to ask you, what is the state of the early childhood learning community at this point? We have seen businesses that have shut down as a result of COVID-19. And, the trend lines are going down. And so at some point, in theory, we're going to ramp up really the reopening of our economy. And so tell us where the childcare community is at this point. And if there are centers that have shut down, what does that mean really for families, but also for businesses?
Well, so essentially we're looking at a sector, and this consists mostly of small businesses, but also an essential sector, an essential service, if you will, because the care and safety, learning and growth of our children that is near collapse. So a couple months ago, almost half of all the centers in the state were closed. Now about 17% of them have sort of reopened, but they're really in this cycle of stop and start. So they're open temporarily, but then they have a staff shortage because staff don't feel comfortable, maybe, or there's an illness, a case of COVID. They don't have cleaning supplies or personal protective PPE, or just cash flow issues because they're, serving right now at about 38% of the children they were serving before COVID. So you've got much less money coming in to a center and yet increased costs to take care of children. I mean, it simply costs more now because of, rightfully so, because of health and safety standards from the CDC and from our health department, smaller class sizes, even smaller than before, obviously cleaning, the supplies, staff, if there's turnover, all the costs that are associated with turnover. Those costs are about, it's hard to quantify, but about 47% or almost half more to run a child care center right now. So that's not a good formula.
I'm sorry, are you saying that almost the child care centers right now are spending 50% more than they did back in, say, February?
And I would say that's a conservative estimate. I've seen much, much higher, and it varies by age group as well. It's actually higher for the older, so the preschool, the 3 and 4 year olds. So yeah, so you're looking at 38% of the revenue coming in, or children, and maybe half or double of the cost. So that's not a sustainable formula. 40% of child care centers that we've surveyed through our partners say they've had to lay off or furlough staff. And so this is just a very untenable situation. You can imagine from a parent's perspective, one, they're worried, about the safety of their child, but they have to go to work. And they, the centers are opening and closing, and it's sort of this chaotic rhythm right now. And so they don't have reliable childcare as well. So it's just, and of course on the child, that takes a toll. And then those kids who aren't in childcare centers, who've been home, they're missing out on the quality early learning experiences. And like Barbie said, 80% of brain development happens by age 3. This is such a critical time to really get quality, teachers who really understand specifically how to work with that age group in environments that promote social, emotional, linguistic learning. So it's really just sort of wreaking havoc on families and on the sector itself.
So let me ask Senator Kate Brophy-McGee, what are you hearing from your constituents, ma'am, insofar as childcare or the lack of childcare, or just the concern that as their companies say go back to work, and when I say go back to work, go back to your offices, go back to the factories, that oh, bless you, bless you, ma'am, that then they might not have the kind of childcare that they had expected before, or they might be at a waiting list. But I guess generally speaking, also from the point of view of the state, how big of a problem it is that we have childcare centers that have shuttered, and some of them are temporarily closed, but a good number might be permanently closed as well.
So I am dealing with a lot of small businesses issues, and I know that people don't, I kind of almost didn't put early childhood as part of essential small businesses that need, but that's exactly what they are. And not only do they need to stay open and operational, but they take care of our children. And so we want them to be staffed with the finest personnel and people, and be safe for the child. The pandemic has raised so many issues to the forefront. Certainly this is a significant one. And the state, all the states really, have had an influx of money from the federal government, which thankfully our governor has put to work. And we need to continue to do that. It's one of those rolling crises. You have a center, an early childhood center, that needs to stay open, but doesn't have the enrollment to justify that. So we have protected their enrollment. We're assuming January levels. But going forward, as parents regain confidence, because that's the other issue, is parents are afraid. They don't want to put their child in these spaces. They're worried about what might happen in terms of COVID. So going forward, we have to make sure we have everything in place, anchored funding-wise and assurance-wise, so these businesses continue to operate and more reopen. It is absolutely crucial and critical to the state's economic recovery.
And Representative Chair, your district has probably the most number of warehouses that we have in the state, right? So crucially, you provide that supply operation centers, if you will. And so what are you seeing on the ground in terms of people's ability to access our early childhood learning centers?
So you're absolutely right, Luigi. My legislative district 19 is probably the backbone of Arizona's economy, especially with essential workers. Essentially what I tell folks is if you've shopped for it, chances are it's come through my district at some point through our distribution centers or our manufacturing. And with all of those essential workers, it comes the need for childcare, because a lot of these families are younger families with younger children. Now, the thing that I always tell folks is there's a misperception that it's babysitting. And if that's what you're thinking, you are really missing the point on here. You only have one shot in that 0 to 5 range, which is absolutely critical in the development of your child. So you really want to take advantage of a high quality learning environment. In my district, we had quite a few families taking advantage of the federal grant, where our lower income families were able to access free education, pre-K education in the district setting and in the private setting. And one of my superintendents, Dr. Roger Freeman in the Littleton School District, tells me he had a waiting list of 200 families waiting to get into one of those programs. Well, Arizona lost that funding, and at probably the worst possible time leading into this pandemic. And now we're scrambling in many ways to just catch up. But again, I'd just like to reiterate that if you are thinking about this as babysitting, then you are really missing the point and really missing an opportunity to make probably one of the best investments society can make, and that's in our youngest scholars.
So I can tell you, for example, that my 9-year-old, our only son, went to a childcare learning center, and that, in my mind at least, that really prepared him to enter kindergarten. And at my child's learning center, for example, they teach obviously all sorts of things, but also they teach Mandarin, for example. And the school that he goes to now, that's that's one of the primary foreign languages that they teach. So there's that. It kind of made sense, and so I'm grateful for that. One of the things that I noticed, well, not noticed, one of the things I know is that it's quite expensive to send your child to a learning center. And I want to ask you, Barbie, um, uh, in terms of cost, for example. And I guess, the idea is if we can bring down the cost for early childhood learning centers, that brings in more families. But if you can talk a little bit about that, and in the context, of course, of child care centers now shutting down, for example.
Well, the cost is the biggest thing. High quality preschool and an early childhood education costs money. It costs, you're running lower ratios, you're training your teachers and probably paying for that training. You're buying excellent supplies and having your classrooms well stocked and staffed. But high quality early learning costs a lot of money, sometimes in excess of a college tuition for a year and a half for somebody, for a family, for just one child. So that is the biggest concern. When we look at centers that take in childcare subsidy that helps families be able to go to work, and so let's just say that we've got a center that has 50% of subsidy and 50% of private pay. If that center owner has to increase his costs, it is really kind of it's funneled through, and the private pay families end up paying for that difference because the subsidy families are receiving a subsidy. And most of the time they're not able to pay the difference between what DES reimbursed that provider and what that provider actually charges those families, because those families can't afford it to begin with. So cost is a big issue. Labor is your most expensive piece in your budget. And even more so now, with maybe centers are running, the CDC is recommending group sizes of 10. And DHS, the Bureau of Child Care License, has also given that in their guidance document as well. Again, it's guidance, and some people can do it and some people can't because they have more families that they need to serve. So they're being really careful about the way that they're doing things. But if we're only running small groups, we're going to have to hire more staff. And then you've got staff that are really scared, or maybe they're older, or maybe they have family members that live with them that are immune compromised and they don't want to, give them to open them up to more exposure. So it's a really tough time right now with costs and labor and staffing and people wanting to come to work. And again, attendance is low and it's pocketed in different areas. But this is a really, really tough time for our providers. And I've had some very humbling conversations with some of my members over the last 6 months.
So when you say that the recommendation is a group size of 10, that means in a room or in a classroom setting, you can only have 10 people, correct?
Yeah, well, so, it's not in rule. It's a guidance. It's a guidance.
Okay.
Practice. Right. So that's what they're looking for. Kind of 10 in a setting. So if you have a large classroom, and you're running, maybe you've got a group on one side of the classroom of 10 and a group on the other side of 10, and they're just not intermingling, that would be doable as well. And again, it goes back to the way that your center is built and the way that your classrooms are. But like Siman said earlier, is that this is not a sustainable model for people. People didn't build their business on having, although this is a great time, we're having smaller groups and with lower amounts of children in a classroom, which is really kind of what we all strive to have in a great world. But this is different in that sense.
So, Siman, I want to ask you about the funding that's coming from the federal government. I think it's $88 million that's that's available to the state, and Governor Doug Ducey has control over that funding. Where has that money been spent?
So it's the 88 CARES Act funds that actually went directly from the feds to the Department of Economic Security. So as far as I understand, we still do need appropriation by the legislature for that funding, but I think because it's such a fluid environment, there have been a lot of great rapid response use for that funding that has really been, I think, a lifeline. So the big chunk of it, 47 million, was recently made available to licensed and certified child care providers, center-based providers, in the form of non-competitive, like operational grants that really help them cover all the essentials so that they can stay afloat. About 1,800 applied, almost that many were awarded, to the tune of about $36 million. So there's still some more money. And if you were just to divide that 36 million by 1,800-ish, it's about 20,000 a center, which is great. But when you think about 6 months and counting in terms of this crisis and closures for the business, it really is sort of a drop in the bucket. Plus the universe of licensed providers is 2,700 across the state. And then you've got another 1,500 out there that are sort of not licensed or regulated. So we still need more. And, I can touch later on sort of why we need to ask our congressional delegation for more federal dollars. So that's sort of the main chunk. And then 24 million was used for the Arizona enrichment centers. And so that was a partnership through Governor Ducey and Superintendent Hoffman, very rapidly erected child care centers for our first responders and essential workers including actually many child care workers, as well as grocery store workers. And so that was absolutely critical. And by the way, those centers were reimbursed at a much higher rate than the current child care subsidy reimburses child care centers that Barbie was talking about. And so that about 500, almost 600 child care centers participated in that ended last month in August. And so then there's another 7 million in the DES increased paid absence program. So that's really just to cover the reality that so many more children are absent for, afraid for health reasons, or they think they're sick, they have symptoms, they want to keep them home. And so that no one loses that revenue. There's, that's sort of to cover that cost. And then another 10 million really just in a child care reserve to address sort of the wait list, because obviously, more parents might qualify now that our economy isn't doing so great, and just sort of like as a reserve to deal with any unforeseen circumstances.
So, Representative Chair, you're hearing all of these issues that have manifested as a result of COVID-19, right? There's what I'm hearing is that the child care learning community needs really primarily financial help. And a lot of these problems is solved financially. But you are dealing with other needs as well. You've got the K-12 education system, you've got the healthcare system, you got all sorts of businesses that have been, pleading for help because they also are in the same boat. They have either shut down and temporarily closed and not really sure if they can reopen. But you're not in session, right? Siman mentioned this funding perhaps needs legislative approval, but you're not in session right now. So, and by the way, are you, perhaps this is just a quick question for Senator Kate Brophy-McGee. Ma'am, what are the chances of you actually going into special session between now and, let's say, December, just before Christmas?
Well, very quickly on the unappropriated nature of the 88 million, we can do that. We can ratify that in retroactively.
Okay.
So I think it's something I really work to do as part of getting out of the legislature, but that it just wasn't one of those things that happened. As far as going into a special session, for the chambers to call each other back, it's a 2/3 vote in each chamber, and the nature of that special session as opposed to a special session that would be called by the governor is that it's free for all. Whatever is important to you in that special session as a legislator is what you put forward. So it's not a single subject special session like the governor would call. So there's a big difference, and I think the chambers are very divided and the caucuses are very divided as to what constitutes a priority to come back into special session. I think the elections will, in one way, shape, or another, resolve it enough that if we have to come back into executive session, or I'm sorry, special session in December, November, we can do that.
So to weigh in there really quickly, Luigi,
yeah.
my great fear is what Senator Brophy McGee just mentioned, that if we do, the legislature calls us back into session, this is a free-for-all. I mean, it opens up some of these things, and I really dread the possibility of a lame duck session where, we're throwing Hail Marys on every bad bill we've ever wanted to do, and we're missing the mark on some of the things that really, really need to get done, especially things like early childhood education, supporting our small businesses. So, I'd be very wary of the legislature calling us back, but if we had a very well-defined, narrow approach, I would be open to opening that up, especially if it was going to get resources to the people that really need them, the businesses that really need them at this point right now.
So,
From Lorenzo's lips to God's ears, if we can come up with an agreement that all lawmakers will honor, I'm all for it. Well said. Thank you.
that would necessitate like a higher degree of altruism from everybody, and the chances of that happening in an election season, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, are probably small. So so I guess you can come back to you'll have to come back into regular session next year. And so, Representative Shera, you had, in fact, introduced legislation to support the childcare community. What I'm assuming you're going to reintroduce that, and what do you think are the chances of that actually, getting to the governor's desk?
So one of the great things about the bill that I had presented last year, 2806, was actually a bipartisan bill that had support along the both spectrums. It was something where we were looking to reestablish the funds that we had lost from the federal grant that Arizona had lost. It became a process where it was a grant competition, and we missed out. One of the reasons that we missed out on that particular grant was the federal government said that Arizona didn't have any skin in the game in terms of what we were putting in from our coffers into early childhood education. So yes, I will be introducing that again, and this time I hope the media would cover my press conference that we did on that. We had about 40 3- and 4-year-olds that came out, and we sang songs and we showed them. And probably one of the best things that I've ever done as a legislator is getting to sit there and hear several dozen preschoolers spell their name to me. They were so proud. They were so happy to be there. And I would hope that everyone would see that what we're doing is, again, just a great investment into our community, into the kids that deserve this shot at a high quality preschool opportunity. But yes, I will be introducing that again. I will be looking for bipartisan support, and hopefully we can get that through this time and make sure that our low-income families have access to free, high-quality early childhood education options.
So from what I understand, what it is the state is going to put in money, and that draws then federal, or that gives us the ability to go to the feds and say, look, we have skin in the game, we're putting in our money, allow us to, or give us this grant. And so that's the idea. How much will it cost? How much is the appropriation? How much is it for that bill?
So my bill gradated went from 7.5 million in the first year, 15 million in the third year, and finally filling the entire hole at 22 million. But it actually went a little bit beyond what the grant was, because we wanted to put in enough money to do the assessment and collect the data on what that looks like. Ultimately, we want to show, because I know anecdotally and I know in my heart that if we make this investment come third grade, when we look at those third grade reading assessments, our kids, our kiddos are going to be right up there where they need to be. And that's one of the key factors that we look at in terms of how we're going to plan for the next 20 years is that third grade reading assessment. And I want to make sure that when they get there, they'll be able to get there. But I think our experts probably have a much better handle on, what that means to be able to get that investment. And
Senator Kate Brophy McGee, what else are you potentially looking at, ma'am, in terms of, I guess the question really is, how else can the state help the childcare community, well, first of all, just survive at this point. But also in the long term, you know, it's not like we didn't have problems before. It's not like it's not like we have sufficient childcare learning centers like throughout the state. Like we have deserts, for example, where we don't have, you know, families don't have access to it. But I guess so. So what are you thinking in terms of how else can the state help at this point, and long term, how can we position ourselves so that there's sufficient access and I guess less cost for the families long term?
Thank you. That's a lot of questions in one. So what I can say first of all is that the pandemic has raised this issue into sharp relief, and it has exposed a lot of underlying issues that 10 years ago, I can tell you, I've been headed down the early childhood road in pursuit of my vision of a P20 education system for Arizona. This is a crucial, crucial part, and there just was no awareness on the radar of so many of my colleagues. And for years, First Things First carried us on the federal match for the early childhood grants. This represents, and as a leader, I have to look at it this way, this is so difficult on our providers, this is so difficult on our parents. This represents an opportunity for us to get it right and to do better. And it's a function not just of money. It is a function of really looking at the programs we're designing, how we want to do that, what's it going to cost. I would love to work with Representative Sierra on his bill. I might, just listening to it, suggest that we do the data study separately. We look at ways to stair step that, but that's a whole nother conversation for another time. One of the reasons I so enjoy working as chair of the Health and Human Services Committee is working with groups like Children's Action Alliance, AZECA, First Things First. They are problem solvers, and they have always been problem solvers. But now, with this issue elevated to the height that it has elevated, jeopardizing families for childcare, jeopardizing the continuation of crucial, essential small businesses, we have a chance to get it right. I think going into the legislature this next session, ratifying the 88 million, and don't forget also that the governor has a pot of money, COVID money, that does not have to be approved or looked at by the legislature, but there is about 430 million, I think. I get my numbers mixed up, but there is at least that much available for things like this. So we've protected enrollments for these childcare businesses. We must then look to regain the confidence of parents, regain the confidence of business owners, and back that up with dollars and workforce development.
So go ahead, Siman. I know you wanted to interject there.
I just wanted to add, so also what I think what really could be done at the state level is, speaking of, you know, that federal reimbursement rate, the child care reimbursement rate, it's woefully low. It doesn't cover the cost of care for providers. It certainly doesn't cover, you know, most options for parents to find child care. So they're paying lots of out-of-pocket costs, or care is out of reach. That's really resulted in an inadequate supply of child care centers. You mentioned child care deserts, so nearly half the state is in a child care desert. And because, again, parents cannot afford care and are forced to sort of create this patchwork of care to work. And a lot of times parents can't work because they don't have reliable care. So one thing we could do at the state level is utilize there's a accrued sort of federal fund balance at DES. We could utilize that to raise that reimbursement rate. And we are out of compliance with the feds. You know, they want us to be at the 75th percentile, which is a way to basically just say, if I'm a parent who's receiving that child care subsidy, I should be able to get care at 75% of the options available to me. Granted, if I'm not living in a child care desert. We're at the 25th, 30th percentile. And we're out of compliance, and we've been told that by the feds. So we could use the fund balance that we've got over at DES to increase the rates. And I would recommend starting at 50%. Let's get up to that 50%, 50% benchmark, work our way up to the 75th percentile. That would do tremendous things. And let's remember, it costs more now to provide care. So we need to raise that reimbursement just to acknowledge the reality that it costs more than it did pre-COVID to provide care. But it was already not where it needed to be. We already created a lack of childcare, quality childcare available because of that. So I would encourage our champions, our Senator Beaufort McGee and Representative Sierra, who have been diehard champions, to really also add that to their agenda.
So if I were to put together a stakeholder meeting around the issues that were just outlined by Siman and Representative Sierra, and what you'd do is you'd break them into separate groups, you'd identify the problem, you'd determine the cost associated, then you develop your list of priorities, understanding that in that environment down there, no matter who's in charge of the chambers, you're competing with limited resources. So,
and not just limited resources, right? Dwindling resources.
Finite resources.
Right, and we're hoping that the state can rebound very quickly, but we don't really know that for sure. And we don't really know exactly what the fiscal situation is going to look like. For now, it looks like we're going to be okay. And, Arizona is always pretty quick to rebound. But it's just, things are just so uncertain. So you might have not just a finite resource, but a dwindling resource.
And you've got to prioritize, differentiate, define, and solve incrementally. And if you can put a whole package together and do that, great. But I think if we have pieces built out and ready to go, we have already differentiated the issue of childcare down at the legislature. And again, I'm going to give a shout out to Representative Sierra, more than we have done almost my entire time down there.
And I would also add that as we're looking at this, as we're putting together stakeholders, that we really take into consideration our Native American populations, because whatever we're talking about here, you can just multiply by X amount of barriers and obstacles in our Native American community. So we need to make sure that those resources actually are going there as well.
So let me ask Barbie, ma'am, let's say, my son is no longer in childcare, but let's say I'm a parent with a kid under 5, and I'm, there's an opportunity for me to actually go to work, but the work requires that I actually go to the office or go to a factory or go to the workplace, and I'm looking around. I'm like, okay, there's potential childcare over here, but I just can't afford it. So walk us through what are the tips that you can provide, any parent, any family that may be in that boat?
Child Care Resource and Referral is a wonderful database, and they are an organization that's it's statewide. It's run under Child and Family Resources, and you can either call them or you can log on to their website and put in the parameters that you're looking for. Are you looking for childcare near your home or near your work? And what age groups that you need, what's important to you. Are you looking for a home provider? Are you looking for a child care center? And they have a statewide database of all of these providers, and it's going to tell you if they're involved in the First Things First, Quality First program, what their star rating system is. It's based on a 5-star rating. Are they accredited by a national accreditation body? So that is a big help for parents and a good resource tool to use. And maybe you have a list of 2, 3, 4 places. And so post-COVID, or during COVID right now, doing a tour might look different. It might be something like we're doing virtually. I'm not sure how many centers are actually doing in-person tours unless they kind of corral you in the lobby and that, give you the information that you need. But do your research and where you feel comfortable. And a virtual tour might be a better option because then you can actually see the classrooms and see the interactions that are going on. But being able to afford it is tough. So DES, if you qualify for maybe the low income working program under that umbrella, or if a child care center is enrolled in Quality First, they might have a scholarship for you. And the federal poverty level limit for them is a lot higher than it is for DES. So people that don't qualify for DES might be able to qualify for a Quality First.
So I'm sorry, what is the name of the organization and what is their website?
Child Care Resource and Referral is the database, is the statewide database. And you know what, I would just Google that Arizona, I don't know that, I used to know that 800 number off the top of my head. And I don't know if maybe if Michelle or somebody from the organization is listening and they could type it into the chat box. But it's Child Care Resource and Referral. And that is a great place to start.
And I can see that.
Also
Liz,
mentioning,
sorry, go ahead now.
Luigi mentioning call 211. I just saw that pop up on the screen.
Yeah.
So happy to sponsor legislation that got that funding restored.
Yeah.
They'll get to there.
Yeah.
And always count on my friends from the United Way to have the resources just readily available. You know, I'm so lucky. Dawn Gerundo lives on my street, and she has been one of the greatest champions for early childhood education and literacy. And it is so awesome to have those resources there, whether it's First Things First, Children's Action Alliance. I can just go down the list. There are so many folks that are working on this, that are dedicated to it. And with so many smart people working on it, I'm sure we can address it in a very systematic and very thorough way.
So if you can just go to the chat room, if you're listening and you're reviewing and trying to figure out what's the website, the websites are on the chat room, so you can just go check those out. Barbie, you were going to say something.
One of the, just real quick, that one of the other things too is that with the grant program that the providers got, one of the things that they're able to use their grant money for is to actually scholarship families. Now the grant money does have to be spent by the end of the year, so it could be short term, but it really could be helpful for some families within the next couple of months as well. So that is an option for providers to do that.
So one of the questions that I have is, of course, the issue of consumer confidence, right? So, you know, I can tell you, for example, in my case, I'm watching very closely the data out of the Department of Health Services and I figure out what the trend lines are. And, you know, the trend lines have been going down, which we should all be very thankful that that's happening. But I can tell you honestly that at this point, I'm not confident to send my 9-year-old to school in person yet. I just, you know, I see the trend lines, but I'm hesitant, and my wife is, you know, in the same boat as I. And so right now, I know his school has offered the opportunity to go in person at some point in the next, I think, 2 weeks or so, something like that. But Barbie and Siman, talk to us about, you know, what the child care learning centers are doing to boost confidence that, you know, when you drop off your child there, you know, the learning center is doing everything it can to minimize the risk of the child getting exposed to COVID-19 and then bringing that virus home.
Right. Well, I think that they've put in some mitigation strategies along with cleaning, extra cleaning, maybe hiring professional companies to come in, and also limiting foot traffic. Having parents to drop their children off at either at the door or maybe curbside, and then having teachers walk them back. Some centers, their teachers are wearing masks. Some of the kids older than 2 are wearing masks. Some of the school-age kids are wearing masks. It's kind of a business decision that, you know, that providers have to take on, and it's been really tough to know what's the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do. So, and I don't want to say that there's a right or wrong way to do it, but it's a decision that you have to make that you feel is going to be the best for your families and the kid that you take care of every day. Oh shoot, I forgot the second part of your question. I'm sorry.
I think you answered. You know, my question really is about consumer confidence, right? That
Yes.
What are learning centers doing to help boost parents' confidence in sending their children to learning centers?
I think it's communication as well. You know, if you do have a positive case, reporting that to your families and to your staff, and again, it goes back to a business decision of what you decide to do. Are you going to close down just maybe that classroom? Are you going to shut down your entire center for 3 or 4 days? That has been the toughest piece to all of this, to know what the right thing to do is for your families and for your staff, and keeping up that confidence that you're doing, you know, that that they feel safe to bring their children there. The other unintended kind of consequence with our schools being closed is the number of school-age children that our providers are now serving doing virtual online learning. This has been a tough piece for our providers. They've had to either install Wi-Fi or up their Wi-Fi speeds, maybe install dividers, again, extra cleaning, trying to hire extra staff to manage the number of school-age kids that are online with maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 different schools, who's getting on at 8 o'clock and who's getting off at 2 and at 11. And then what happens if, Luigi, you don't log in at 11 o'clock for math, that, am I going to be held liable for your child not logging in on time? So these are different pieces that we didn't ever think about that we would be here at this time, but childcare providers are really trying to navigate this as best that they can.
And I would just add too that I think what would help are, sort of coordinated guidelines from all the different regulatory bodies, including the CDC, county health departments, state health departments, the Department of Education, all well-meaning, all, intended to keep our children and our families safe. But sometimes, the right hand's not talking to the left hand. And so there's confusion. And so I think really just sort of one clear, coherent guidance for childcare providers about what should be clean, how often, what do I do with a positive COVID case? So I close a whole center, that classroom, for how long, that type of stuff. And then I think just like we've been doing, sorry, there's a street cleaner, just like we've been doing for K-12 teachers, recognizing that they're teaching in a radically different learning environment. We need that for early learning teachers, particularly preschool teachers or childcares who are taking care of school-age children, really hoping that folks come across the state, come together and provide some supports for early learning and care teachers so that they can adapt and do best by kids in this environment.
Yeah.
I want to go to
you hit on something. You hit on something very, very critical when you're talking about your own 9-year-old, and that is just how precious our children are to our families. And we can talk about it in clinical terms and in policy terms, but ultimately there is no greater love than we have for our children, especially our young children as they're developing and growing. And by and large, we as policymakers have failed those families in so many significant ways. And building that trust over the next couple of years is going to be a monumental task for whoever comes into policy leadership, just a monumental task in rebuilding that faith in our institutions. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up about your own concerns you have with your 9-year-old. So whatever you're feeling, I'm sure hundreds of thousands, if not millions of families are feeling that as well. And, it is going to take a while, but we got to rebuild that trust in our systems.
And thank you for mentioning that, Representative. I'm very grateful for this situation I'm in because I'm actually able to work from home. But I do know parents that don't have the same opportunity that I have to be able to work from home and just be with their kids, 24/7. I want to get to some of the questions from the audience. We kind of went through this one already, but here's a question from Stephen. There's no doubt that $1 spent in quality early childhood education saves more than $10 later in terms of avoiding the cost of the juvenile justice, welfare, and other costs. But since the Arizona legislature has historically underfunded K-12 education, how can we expect them to provide funding for this very critical part of the education continuum? As I mentioned, we kind of went through this one already, but let me ask Senator Kate Brophy-McGee and then Representative Lorenzo share about this.
Adequate funding for K-12 education has been my biggest fight. And I came into the legislature during the Great Recession, and that has always been my #1 priority. We have been successful in putting $4.5 billion new dollars back into K-12 education. And it took a series and sequence of events for that to happen. My goal, policy-wise, is to look at Arizona's education system as P20. The quality education starts in the early years. That is the mantra of first things first, and it continues throughout post-secondary education. for our children. As I said, the pandemic has brought to sharp relief and light the issues around early childhood, the importance of early childhood so that parents can go to work, so they don't stay home and tap into government resources because they can't work. And that, I think, has been a lesson learned by many of my colleagues. It's something I've always known, but I think many of my colleagues get it. And so I think going forward, I previously in a question had outlined our steps towards taking an incremental approach, a measured approach in building out our early childhood system, and what those stakeholder meetings might look like, what those funding proposals might look like. And I think in the upcoming legislature, there will be far more of an appetite for bipartisanship, I hope.
Representative Shira, it's the same question, sir.
Yes, so we're in a very here and now type culture, meaning that it's not a problem until it's a problem. We don't worry about infrastructure until our bridges fall apart. Early childhood education is not a here and now. It is in the fact that we are doing that, but the ultimate benefits are going to be, 15, 20, 30 years from now when our 3 and 4 year olds are leading very productive lives and leading a stronger society. So I fully realize that the work I'm doing here for early childhood, I may never see the benefits of it, and that's okay with me. But those are the investments that we need to make, and there's really hard discussions that we have to have in terms of how do we allocate and how do we raise the revenues and the resources needed to get this all done. And again, as the senator just mentioned, I'm looking forward to a vibrant and productive discussion in this upcoming session around not only this issue, but many others.
And Barbie and Siman, I want to ask you this one. Here's one question from Aaron. Sounds like we're grappling with both supply and demand side pressures. What's being done at the state level to help educate parents and reassure them that it's safe to bring children back to formal, high quality environments? I think we discussed that, but here's the second part of the question. What is being done or could be done at statewide level to coordinate procurement of cleaning supplies, PPE that centers need? The idea is that if you're buying in bulk, can you bring down the cost?
Right.
So Barbie, do you know if something like this is happening at the statewide level?
I'm sorry, my computer froze. Can you repeat that question for me?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So the question is about cleaning supplies and PPE that centers need.
Right.
And the question is that, is there some sort of a coordination at the state level to maybe pool resources and buy these PPEs and these cleaning supplies in bulk so that it's, the idea is that if you're buying in bulk, you bring down the cost.
Your costs come down. That is a great conversation that I think that needs to happen at a bigger level. During the Enrichment Center program, the Department of Administration was tasked by the governor's office to do exactly that. So when providers did their weekly report every week, there was a checkbox that they could put in. I need bleach, I need wipes, I need gloves. Gloves were really hard to find. I need toilet paper, I need paper towels. Things like those items were hard to come by for a long time. And then when they came back into supply, you were either limited on the amount that you could order or their cost had skyrocketed. And gloves are something that we have to have in early childhood to change diapers. And so regardless of what they cost, they have to have them. So I think that would be a really good discussion to have, to be able to level out the playing field and negotiate some sort of contract with somebody as a statewide and have that those resources be available to providers.
And Siman, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I would just say, the early childhood community just really came together across the state in just such a rapid response, and just really, raised the issues that were most critical at the time in such a fluid environment, and continues to do that and continues to push for what's needed. Right now, they're trying to push for additional federal funds. And a great part of why they were sort of primed and ready to mobilize is because of the Arizona Early Childhood Alliance, AZECA, that Senator Brophy-McGee mentioned. Is that, you know, the early childhood community was working for years to sort of come to one table and to speak with one voice, and become aligned on the priorities. And so when crisis hit, you know, sort of there was already this like strong network of people who trusted each other and who had agreed sort of on what was key and important. So that, I think that has really been why the early childhood community has been able to raise the issues and create the awareness that it has.
Yeah. First things first, stepped up pretty quickly when we realized that there was a shortage of toilet paper and hand sanitizer, and leveraged some items from the Paradise Valley School District, and we're forever thankful for them. We went with many trucks and delivered to you know, some places that let us store the stuff, and did distribution centers for quite some time. And then when the enrichment centers started up, that they kind of took over that piece. So we're really thankful for that. But yeah, the early childhood community is a phenomenal group of really resilient, strong, loving people. And I'm very honored to be a part of it.
And I think we are out of time, so I just want to thank Barbie, Representative Shera, Senator Kate Brophy-McGee, Siman. Thank you all for spending the time this morning. I learned a lot. And to our viewers and our listeners, thank you for spending the morning with us. Go check the chat lines. There's a lot of resource there that I'm seeing. And to Helios Education Foundation, I want to thank you for sponsoring this morning's discussion. And with that, I guess I'll say enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you around.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.